We're good? Okay. Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Poison Pen Bookstore. It's always such a treat and an honor to welcome Joe Lansdale back to the Poison Pen. He's going to be talking about his new book, Jackrabbit Smile. Please give him a nice, warm...
Thank you. I see some familiar faces and some that aren't familiar. It's great. It's great.
Well, it's always a treat to have you back.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll talk. There's a lot to talk about. Tell us a little bit about this book, this new book. There's a lot going on in here.
Yeah, yeah. It does have a whole lot for a short book.
Yeah.
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 A lot of people said you must have written it because of events now, but actually many of the events that I use in here are real events that happened way back. And there's an unusual situation. I don't want to give much away, but what I will say, there's an unusual death that occurs in that, and that really happened, and I just borrowed it from the crime stories and put it in there and adapted it to the way I wanted it to be. But I didn't make that up.
Hogs involved?
What's that?
Hogs involved?
No, not hogs this time. This was the one where the guy just kind of had an idea of how he wanted to die.
Oh yeah.
And wanted help. But that's real, and it's extremely seems like, oh, that's over the top. No, that was the real deal. Oh, do I need this? Are y'all having trouble hearing me? Yeah, that helps. But I usually have such a big mouth. I hate doing this. This deals with racial issues. I think it also deals with different takes on those racial issues. I'm trying to do this without giving too much away. But even the main antagonist is based on a real person and how this real person spoke and how this real person suggested things should be done with races. And I borrowed that from reality too. Yeah, a lot of the stuff I find in my books that's the most outrageous is real, and then the other stuff that they go, oh yeah, you made that up. No, that's real. And the other stuff I made up. So in this case, yeah.
Well, so Hap and Brett have finally
got married.
Finally tied the knot, and I mean, this is very early in the book, so we can talk a little bit about the setup.
We have to give away some of it to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. And they're having a good old Texas-style reception. Right. Barbecue,
right.
Hot dogs, and Frank, the whole deal.
Right.
And a truck pulls up.
Right.
Tell us how.
Well,
it starts.
what happens is that you know what? Let me read it.
Yeah.
Let me just read the opening here. Y'all ain't have anything to do till tomorrow morning, right? No. We could get through the whole book. I'll just read this section and maybe figure out how to do the microphone here. Can you hear me without the microphone?
Yeah.
Okay. Even when I'm doing something enjoyable, it seems death and destruction lurk nearby. I might not recognize those dual demons right away, but they're out there. They might arrive in a pickup truck, and those in it may seem at first like a lot of people I might see, just folks going about their business. But they may be carriers of a repulsive kind of disease, and there are many symptoms: hate and prejudice, ignorance, and a profound pride in what they don't know. They are those who go with their gut, which is about as accurate as throwing chicken bones or reading signs in frog entrails. I don't know they're coming until they're there, and even then, I might not understand exactly what has walked into my life. I may think, considering my experience, that I'll know right away if something's going to go dark and wet, but I still get fooled. And their kind of disease can have a ripple effect. It's not just their viewpoint, it's how their viewpoint affects others. They spread their germs without even being aware of it. I was in the side yard with Brett, enjoying our Saturday in a fine April afternoon, cooking up some burgers, bratwurst, and weenies on the grill. The aroma in the air was thick enough, if you smacked your lips, you could taste them. We were celebrating. 3 hours before, me and Brett had gotten married by the Lord Justice of the Peace. No Bible, no preacher, just the law. Me and her had talked about pulling that trigger for some years, and finally we had gone and done it. I couldn't have been happier. When we got married, we had a small crowd there at the JP's office, close friends and a few strays we had taken in, and they were coming in a little later to enjoy our wedding picnic. We had a long folding leg table laid out with paper plates and cups and an ice chest with a bag of ice in it. We had folding chairs stacked on the ground ready for use. I was scraping a burger off the grill, flipping it. I thought we might go to Paris for a honeymoon, Brett said, but then I got to thinking about a cookout in the yard and nixed it. Yeah, French cooking can kiss my ass, baby. I'm doing burgers and dogs. Don't burn them this time, Brett said. Nope, I'm on it. And you know what? Everything goes well. We can play horseshoes after lunch, and later tonight you can play with my ass. Oh, you charmer. That's right, baby. Stick with me and you'll be farting through silk. A white pickup coasted to the curb in front of our house and parked next to the oak tree that grew near the street. It wasn't a truck that belonged to one of our guests. It wasn't a truck that belonged to anybody I knew. The tires on the truck were so high that when the door opened, the driver, a thin 30-ish man with wiry muscles and sandy blonde hair, practically had to dangle himself down to the curb. On the other side, a woman worked her way out of the passenger side and came around the front of the truck. She had lowered some kind of stool to make her exit. I caught a glimpse of it from under the truck. Both of them probably had nosebleeds from sitting so high. They started across the yard. It made me a little nervous, especially when I saw the t-shirt the man was wearing. It was white with blue lettering on the front that read, "White is right." That's a real t-shirt that I saw, by the way. Not one of my sentiments, even though my skin's as pale as milk when it isn't tanned or sunburned. The young man had on black jeans and lace-up boots and so many tattoos visible on his arms and neck that for a distance I thought he was wearing long sleeves. Close up, I could see more tattoos through the thin fabric of his t-shirt. I assumed he might have others in places less interesting to me, and a box of stick-on tattoos at home along with a pointed white hood for those special evenings out with the clan. That may sound judgmental, but hey, that t-shirt told me a lot. The woman was probably in her late 50s, garbed up in what I think of as traditional Pentecostal style, meaning her brown hair was in a bun so tall and wide she could hit an electric mixer under it. And she was wearing a blue jean dress that fell almost to her ankles and was capped off by clunky black boots that looked one grade up from orthopedic shoes. She didn't have on any makeup, not even lipstick or eyeliner. From certain religious points of view, God and Jesus get all worked up about hairdos and makeup, but couldn't seem to end a war anywhere or kill a disease. I thought maybe God had his priorities out of whack. Those two looked so much like stereotypes it would have surprised me. It wouldn't have surprised me to discover they had venomous snakes in their pockets and could speak in tongues. The man slowed and let the woman take the lead. She came right to me, stuck out her hand, and I shook it. She didn't offer it to Brett. The man didn't offer his hand to either of us. He stood there with his hands in his pockets. One eyelid spasmed from time to time as if being periodically electrocuted. I could have sworn I saw one of his neck tattoos crawl under his shirt, but I suppose it was a shifting of the light. Up close I could see some of the tattoos were professional and some were sort of you do it yourself or get in prison, or perhaps a 3-year-old with a carving knife and a bottle of ink had been hired to mark it up. "You're the one got that private detective agency, aren't you?" the woman said. "She does," I said, nodding at Brett. "I work for her." "Oh, I thought you owned it and had her and that colored fellow working for you. What's he do there?" "Well, he eats cookies and drinks coffee, from what I can tell," I said. "He works there, same as this man, who, by the way, is my husband." I like the way Brett said that. I felt like a big dog. I was so happy I wanted to wag my tail. "You work for your wife?" the man said. It was like his mind had just snapped to attention. "It's either that or she doesn't let me eat. Sometimes when he's sassy or acting a little hysterical, I make him stand in the yard and hold a heavy rock over his head," Brett said. The woman grinned a little, but the young man looked at me as if he were concerned I not only didn't wear the pants in the family, but might have accidentally cooked my dick on the grill in place of a sausage. "We looked you up in the phone book, drove by your office a few times," the woman said. "We asked around about y'all trying to decide." "Decide what?" Brett said. "We got this problem, and truth is everyone else turned us down." "Who's everyone else?" I said. "The other private detective in town." "There's another one?" I said. and all them over in Tyler and Longview, too. Ain't none over in Marble Creek, which is where we've got the problem. So there wasn't no one to ask there. Cops here can't do nothing. It's out of their jurisdiction. "Thing is, we heard you had that colored man working here," the young man said, "and that put us off some. At first we thought he just cleaned up the office." I thought, bless your little ignorant heart. "Here's something might put you off even more," I said, and pointed. Marvin Hanson's car pulled up at the curb, and he and Officer Carroll, as we always called Kurt, got out. Hanson was carrying a 12-pack of diet sodas under his arm, and Officer Carroll had a 12-pack of beer under his. The sodas were mostly for me, the beers were some of the others. From the back seat came the niece of Leonard's ex-boyfriend, John. Her name was Felicity, and she was just out of her teens and had her hair in pigtails today, tied up on both sides with bright blue ribbons. Finally, there was Reba, the little girl Leonard called the 400-year-old vampire midget. Truth was, 12 years old or not, Reba could be a bitch. She had a mouth like a sailor's and a mind as sharp as a butcher's knife. I had to make sure she didn't get in the beer when no one was looking. All of them except Officer Carroll were black as black could be, and you could see the man and the woman taking that in the way soldiers might count their enemy's artillery mounted on a hill. Officer Carroll was Leonard's boyfriend. I kind of figured same-sex relations were probably on the pair's no-no list as well. That gives you the opening. and sets up those characters.
I tell you, Joe, that's why I purposely have avoided the TV series, because when I read Hap and Leonard, I want to hear that voice.
Yeah. Well, you know, James tried to copy my accent, and he worked on that first season. And after a little while, I said, James, you're going to put your eye out. You're going to have to just find something in between. And now that he's got through the third season, he's much closer. And it's weird because he has mannerisms that are very similar to mine. It creeps me out. And I don't know if he did it on purpose, but my son and daughter will go, what the hell? But I'm happy with the TV series, but I'm always happier with me.
How involved are you in the TV show?
Well, I'm a co-executive producer, and I get to say whatever I want and suggest whatever I want, and then they get to do whatever they want. So it's not as big a dog as you would think. But I get to come in and lay down on the pallet once in a while, then they'll let me on the couch. But I had a little bit more. I got banned from the set the second season because I didn't like what they were doing and told them. And I wrote one of the scripts. And I had to write things in the script I didn't like, and finally they ended up changing them, but I got banned from the set, and I was very proud of that. But the third season they asked me back, and I came and was in the writer's room for 2 or 3 days, I forget exactly, and I told them this is how I think this ought to be from my standpoint, and then you've got your ideas, and I'll do it right and you'll do it wrong, and we'll move on. But no, I actually, joking, you know, I honestly like the show a whole lot. And even their changes haven't bothered me particularly. You know, they have to change things for the simple reason that then how do they get their credits if they're copying me? That's what they're thinking. And I always think a really good writer doesn't mind copying somebody who invented the goddamn series. But that said, I really do love what they're doing, and I'm joking a little. And James and Mike are fabulous. And the first season, we had Christina Hendricks, and God, she was so good. And we had Jimmy Simpson, who's fantastic, Polly McIntosh, Bill Sage, my friend Neil Sandilands, and other friend Jeff Pope. They were all just fantastic. And then the next season, we had Brian Dennehy, Irma Hall, who I love dearly. And then this season, we've got Lou Gossett, we've got Corbin Burnson, is how you say his name? And he's a great guy, too. And we've got just a stellar cast, and so they haven't skimped on that, and it's their #1 show. It's been very popular, but we still don't know whether it'll be renewed or not because it's not always about how popular it is.
Where did they film it?
The first season they filmed it right across from East Texas in Baton Rouge, and then in the other two have been outside of Atlanta and some areas of Atlanta. I remember one of the things people in the first season. A guy said, that was working on the set from L.A. said, I really like your novels, but man, the weather couldn't be that shitty, could it? And I said, you know what? You're in Baton Rouge, but that's just like a line in the dirt from where I live. Just wait a minute. And so that very day, we had the sun. It was blistering, and then along came a rainstorm, and it just was tremendous. In fact, poor Jeff Pope was playing a scene where they couldn't move him. He was in mud, and they had to just leave him there. We all just went and had some coffee. And yeah, we'll be back. and then after that came a tornado, and it come and knocked one of the tents over. Then my niece, who was working for me, was kind of taking care of me that I didn't get lost and wander around. She was driving us back to the apartment, and it came a hailstorm. And the hailstorm was so intense we had to stop beside the road. I saw that guy the next day, and I said, what do you think about the weather now? And we didn't have anything that intense the rest of the time, but it rained every day, or it would have wind, or it would be blistering hot. And as James Purefoy said, it's the only set he's ever been on where you had to have a rifle to keep venomous reptiles away. Because there were alligators, and that's East Texas. People think, you know, desert and mountains, and we're not like that at all. You know, nothing like that.
Yeah, you really describe it beautifully in The Bottoms. Has anybody read that book, The Bottoms?
Great book.
And we were talking in the back how we've lost some people this last year. Bill Paxton.
Bill Paxton, a good friend.
And
Bill Kreider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has that put kind of a hold on the Bottoms movie?
It's been revived. When it happened, Bill had called me before he went in for his operation just to, you know, say, I've got to go in for this, that you might need to get a different director. I said, what are you talking about? They're getting a different director after all we've been through. You know, I'm not doing that. And I said, I haven't signed anything, so I'll just wait on you. And he said, well, I'm going in. I'm a little nervous about it. And I said, you'll be all right, you know. But if something happens, I want your stuff, you know. and we joke like that because it's the way we did to make each other feel better about stuff. And he, we texted and emailed a little bit after that. And then he went in on Valentine's Day for heart surgery. I always think about that. And about 4 days later, I hadn't heard from him. So I texted and I emailed, nothing. And then I talked to a friend of mine that was closer with his immediate family. And he got in touch with him. They said he's struggling. I said, oh, hell. And the next day he was dead. And so that put me in a position where I didn't want to do it anymore. And so time passed, and eventually they said, look, we want to dedicate this to Bill. And I said, I have a few prerequisites, which I won't name, but there's certain things I had to have before we would continue. And they were kind enough to give them to me. And we have found a director we like. He's not somebody who's ever directed a film yet, but he's an art director, and he's incredibly talented. I think he's the perfect match for what we're going to do. We're going to dedicate it to Bill, and that's the closest you can do. It doesn't mean much ultimately, but it means something. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember it was fresh when you came here last year,
Yeah.
roughly this time. I remember pretty tore up about it.
Yeah, that was what was, yeah, I'm still pretty tore up about it. I can't watch a show with Bill in it. And he's in every damn thing. You know? We used to joke about that. He'd say, I pick up every magazine and book and you're in it. And I said, well, every time I turn on the TV or a movie, you're in it. You know? We joke like that. And then now I look around and think, you know, he really is in everything. And everything from, you know, Tombstone to Apollo 13. And, you know, there was a funny story they told at his memorial. They had a lot of nice people. Tom Hanks and Sigourney Weaver and, you know, Rob Lowe, who does a perfect Bill Paxton imitation. Just perfect. But they had one guy was a producer, and I'm sorry I can't remember who, but he was a producer who worked with Bill, and he said that Bill told him a story once when they were in England that he met his wife, who was English, in London. And what happened is that he was standing on the sidewalk, and a bus pulled up down near them, and a beautiful girl came out and got on the bus and went, and Bill went, holy cow, and ran to the next bus stop and got on, and that's how he met her. And he said, I was standing right here when I met the lovely Louise. So they started walking down the road, and after a little while, Bill went, you know what, that was the wrong street. And that's Bill. He was all over the place, you know, but he did meet his wife that way, and I always thought that was a lovely story.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were a longtime friend with Bill Kreider,
Oh,
who's
yes.
another Texas writer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very prolific Western and crime fiction.
Yeah. And Bill and Steve Mertz over here, and that's the old guy with the long hair and the glasses right there. We were together as friends for a long time, and we started out together in, was it Mike Shane, right? And I think maybe they had been published before me a little bit, but we all kind of started out in Mike Shane, and we've been friends all that time since. And our careers, you know, we all continued along in different trajectories, but careers. And so it's kind of like losing a brother. And then before that, I lost a sister because I lost his wife. My wife and I really took Judy's death hard and Bill's death hard, but they were really special people.
Yeah. There were a bunch of you kind of weirdos from Texas, like Neil Barrett Jr.
Oh, my God.
And,
he was the best of all of us.
Tell us about him.
Neil Barrett, God, one of my
with his
favorite
work.
stories about Neil Barrett, and this had a lot to do with the kind of writer he became. When he was a child, he got a Christmas present. You got to remember that he was born much early. He died at 84, about quite a few years ago. So you know he went back to the 30s and stuff. But one morning, his father, who worked in radio stations and controlled those, it was Christmas, and he said, under the tree over there, go over and look. And Neil looked, and there was a little house under there. He said, open it up. Neil opened it up, and a puppy came out and bit him. And it ran wild all over the place, biting people, had rabies. So he had to go get shots. Everybody had to go get shots in his stomach. I thought only Neil Barrett could get a rabid puppy for Christmas. And of course, the dog didn't make it. But that happened. Yeah. And then another time, he had a job. He applied for a job where they wanted him to write a newsletter. And they said, yeah, and we'll pay you this much, which was quite a bit of money for that time, if you'll write a newsletter once a month. Can you do that? He'll go, yeah, I can do that. He's thinking, ho. So they got the contract out, and they're getting it ready, and an old man's walking by the doorway, shuffling, pretty old, 90s, And he comes by and they said, oh, wait. They said, Mr. Baird, this is, I forget what his name was, but he's the founder of our company and all that. And he said, oh, okay, glad to meet you. He gets up and then he goes back and the old man shuffles off. And so they're getting a contract and they're discussing it, talking over. A little bit later, here comes the old man shuffling back and he goes, and he fell over dead. No joke. And they never signed that contract. And that was the end of that. No, nothing like. And Neil Barrett was in Dallas and he heard these shots. I wonder what that was. And around the corner, President Kennedy had been assassinated. He was like Forrest Gump. My favorite one was when he was in Germany. The general got drunk and called for them to have a strike on the Russians. I guess it was East Germany, probably. And Neil said, no. So he prevented World War III. And the next day, the general comes in and he was like very, because, he remembered just enough to know he was drunk. But had somebody, I think it was somebody with Neil, and Neil went, no. And I thought, you prevented World War III. How can you not think, bless his heart. That's what I told him. You're my hero. You prevented World War III. And that's just something. One time Neil and I were at, and every time we get together, things would go to hell. But one time, just one of the simple stories, I won't get into some of the others because it might embarrass Neil's folks. But he's got a wife still, and she's 90-something, or right at late 80s, and his family, who are great people. But Neil and I, one time, we went to a convention, and we were all going to go to lunch. And he said, we'll go in my car. Great, because he had a big boat of a car. And we come out, and it's at College Station, and there's just cars everywhere. And we think, okay, but where are we going? And so we walk, we go in, and after a little while, he says, huh. So he walked. We walked there for 30 minutes. He had no idea where he parked. And that was before these little clickers. And so we had to wait till the end of the convention when everybody left to find Neil's car. We ended up going in somebody else's car. But he was that kind of guy. Just stuff happened. We did a seminar for writing out in some weird podunk place in Texas, out in West Texas, which is already too weird for me. I don't like all that space. I want trees and I want alligators. But anyway, we were there, and this people, it was like a town of 50 or 60, and people came over to the writing conference, which was in an old women's college that no longer existed. And there were like gargoyles that had fallen off the roof and were in the roof. And so we were there, and these people came over, and they said, we're from the community center for this particular town name I can't remember right now. And we were thinking, community center? There's a community center? And they said, and we're going to do a play, and we thought we might be able to come over and do that for you, and it's a musical. And I went, oh, that sounds really nice. That's good. And they never did come over.
Ohinaga or something?
No, they never. What's that?
Was it Ohinaga?
No. Here's the thing. Neil, for whatever reason, because Neil was Neil, decided it was cats. And he said, Joe, they're going to use real cats. I can see it. They're going to cat. And he got all worked up about it, and everybody was thinking, they're using a real cat. Because he was so convincing that I thought, well, he has no idea. And they never showed up. So we sat out in the car and listened to a boxing match. But that's Neil Barrett Jr., my hero.
What kind of stuff did he write?
Oh my God, he wrote everything.
The Hereafter Gang?
The Hereafter Gang is his masterpiece. Yep. He wrote one, the Hereafter Gang is about the afterlife. I remember Jesus playing basketball in heaven, and all the women smell like, or the beautiful woman smells like Dr. Pepper, which I can see that. And then there was another one he wrote called Interstate Dreams, and a guy in Vietnam had some sort of Agent Orange type thing, and when he got near locks, they would go to sleep, is the way Neil described it. The locks would pop open. So obviously, people wanted him to use him to rob banks or things of that nature. Right. And things just go wrong. And then he wrote one called
Pink Vodka Blues.
Pink Vodka Blues.
And a couple of others in that series.
Right. And that was optioned for film by Whoopi Goldberg for a long time. They thought they were going to make it. And it's so, they're so weird. And he did the Dead Dog Blues and the Skinny Annie Blues. There was one, I remember that they had shaved these dogs and written this special code or something on them and let their hair grow back. And they had tattooed it on them. And so that was the secret, was that, you know, you had to get these poodles to find out what's going on.
So you're saying that he might be even a little weirder than you?
Oh, he's much weirder.
Really?
Yeah, he's my mentor in the weird.
There's also William Browning Spencer.
Oh, I love
Is he
Bill.
another Texan?
Oh yeah, Bill, another messed up guy in the best way. I mean, you know, his ideas are so out there. You know, he's just you need to read both of these guys. You know, I'd look them up. I really would. They're both terrific.
Well, some of you have probably heard me ask Joe this before, but I'm so fascinated with Nacogdoches, and in your books, you know, it was this really interesting history, right? A crossroads,
Yeah.
kind of a traveling
The
spot.
oldest town in
from-
Texas.
Really? Yeah, and so in your books you refer to it a lot. You know, a place where traveling medicine shows went
Right.
through, and carnies.
Everything. Davy Crockett was his last stop before the Alamo.
Is that right?
And they asked him to be a politician. I bet when those Mexicans were coming over the wall, he thought, politics wouldn't have been that bad. Because he had said, when he left Tennessee, he said, you know, the rest of you can go to hell and I'm going to Texas, because he didn't get back in Congress. But he stopped off in Nacogdoches on the way. Sam Houston lived there for a while. The house where Davy Crockett, Sam Houston stayed during their passing is still there. And so it's part of a giant library of historical documents and things like that.
Wow. And so coming up, you know, I've heard you talk about this before. You know, drive-ins played a real important
Yes.
part in your childhood.
Yes.
And so monster movies, old Western history,
Right.
medicine shows,
Right.
all these different things kind of came together
Yeah.
in your mind.
Hey, you know, what's interesting, I think, is that I wanted to be a writer when I was 4 years old, but I wanted to write comics because I grew up on comics. And originally it was like Funny Animals, and then you're getting into the superhero comics and Batman. What I decided is I wanted to be Batman, actually. And because Batman knew all kinds of stuff, and he knew martial arts and things like that. And my mom even made me a little Batman suit, and my nephew, who was almost my age, because my brother was 17 when I was born, they made him a Robin suit. So, you know, we had these suits that we wore and we played, and we thought, you know what, solve crime.
Wait, your older brother was Robin?
No, his son, my nephew.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, and he was Robin. No, my brother wouldn't.
That would be odd. Yeah.
No, my brother wouldn't play. And so we were young and we were playing, but we decided that we would solve crime in Mount Enterprise, which is where we lived at that time, which had a population of 150. But then one night when I went to bed, I got up the next morning and found out that the Mount Enterprise Bank had been robbed. I knew that career wasn't for me because I didn't do night work, and they didn't have a bat signal, so I didn't know. And I thought, well, what if they did? I was gonna be asleep. How did Batman always see the signal? What if he was sleeping?
Yeah.
But then it inspired me to get interested in a lot of different things, which is what a writer does, I think. They get interested in all kinds of things. I did martial arts because my dad was a boxer and a wrestler. He wrestled in fairs during the Great Depression. And that influenced me. I got into martial arts, which I've been doing for 55 years now. I got Batman kind of led my life that way, but he caused me to read all kinds of things. Comics led me to different things. Classics Illustrated led me to all of the classic novels that I could, possibly consume. And as I got older, of course, you discovered others. Also, the old movie serials were playing on TV, like Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, the old Tarzan films with not just Weissmuller, but everyone that had ever played Tarzan, except maybe Elmo Lincoln. I don't think they showed that one. But they had all of these things, and they all just, and Roy Rogers and Gene Autry had these weird shows. Like Gene Autry had this one called The Phantom Empire. Do y'all remember that, or know anybody know that? And it was it was about the Atlanteans who lived underground and had these robots that would come up, like little 10-man robots, and they would come up, but whatever adventure they had that week, they always made it back to Melody Ranch in time for the radio show, which would include songs and stuff. And it's a whole series, that they showed on TV, and you could actually still purchase it. And all of that stuff just kind of went into the same soup and just boiled and cooked. And
a lot of Mark Twain, too.
A lot of Mark Twain, a lot of Jack London, a lot of Rudyard Kipling, Robert Louis Stevenson, Ray Bradbury, Richard Matheson. Because then I had Thriller, I had Twilight Zone, I had Outer Limits, When I Could See It, and a bunch of these other, Alfred Hitchcock. So I had these, I had the literary impulses, and I didn't know that you weren't supposed to mix genres. Because I never had a writing class or anything. I didn't. You know. In fact, when I was in English, I have 2 years of college, but I took an English course, and we all had to write a story. And we turned them in, and my teacher told me, he said, "I hope you're not going to be a writer." And I've never forgotten it, because I bet I was the only one in there that became a writer. I could be wrong, you know, it could be somebody else. But so all of that stuff, yeah, it just came together. And it usually comes out in the books, whether in certain degrees, certain levels. These are more crime. I think they fit that. But they're also other novels I read that were just literary novels, and things that I read that had tones of horror and attitude, and then Mark Twain. You know, I always loved humor, and I always loved a writer who could write satirically. I've never liked prose that I think of as just little turds in a row. You know, I like prose that it doesn't have to be poetic in a big way, but it does have to have some kind of style. Like, I love Hemingway. I think he's poetic. People have never read him talk about all those short sentences. You haven't read Hemingway, actually. You know, or you take Fitzgerald, he's a different kind of poetry. You take Steinbeck, definitely a different kind of. Take Ray Bradbury, it's a different kind of poetry. But I like something that you could read, like Raymond Chandler, you know, and people that had that chewy. I don't have this exactly right, but in Chandler, it was about 10 o'clock in the morning with the sun not shining and a hard, wet look of rain in the foothills. You know, wow. For me, I'm in. You know, and then he talks about what he was wearing. He said, "What was it? I was shaved, clean, and sober, didn't care who knew it." So now you got the humor, see?
Yeah.
So you got to, and you know this guy in a couple of sentences, a paragraph anyway.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the kind of writing that always appealed to me.
Well, you've written a lot about the Great Depression,
Right.
in one way or another,
Right.
Especially in the bottoms, of course. But I'm fascinated also with Nacogdoches and Joe's father for some weird reason.
Yeah.
Your dad was like the ultimate badass.
He was the ultimate badass.
And tell us a little bit about him.
Well, my dad was born in 1909. His mother died when he was 8, and they put him to work in the cotton fields. He never had a day of school. He couldn't read or write. And I remember one story that my uncle told me about him. He said that they put him on a horse, a paint horse. He had a paint horse, and they sent him to the cotton field when he was 8 years old. Put in a day's work like a man. And he fell off the horse, busted his eardrum. And he got back on the horse and rode back to the house because he was hurt. And his father took a horsewhip and beat him and sent him back to the, like the rose fields where I work, sent him back to the cotton fields to work. So here was a guy that grew up in a totally different era, at a different time. And then as he started, working, and he did all kinds of physical labor, he then decided that he would go to these fairs, and he was watching these boxers and wrestlers. So he started learning that. So he started catching trains, hoboing, not, he wasn't paying for a ticket. He was underneath them or in a boxcar. And he would ride from carnival to carnival and box and wrestle them. And he was good enough that he was able to supplement when he wasn't working in the canning factories or whatever. And eventually my mother bought an old car. I don't know if it was a Model T or a Model A, I don't remember, but it was one of the older ones. And she said, "Take that thing apart until you can put it back blindfolded, together again blindfolded," because he wanted to be a mechanic. And that's how he became a mechanic. He just did the car till he could do it, practically blindfolded. And so that's how he went into that. But he was one of those guys that, I've told this story before, maybe I'll tell a truncated version of it, but I remember when I was probably about 5 years old, he got me a dog. Yeah, I've told this story, but a Blackie, he called him Honky Tonk because he got him at a honky tonk below our house. We said that we had a house that was on a hill, and below it was a honky tonk. There was a highway, and then there was a drive-in theater, and above us the hill went up, and there was another house. So he got me this dog, and man, we were close. That dog was like a brother. And so we went out to play one day, and we went up the hill. Well, this guy on the hill, the top of the hill, he had a flower bed, beautiful flowers. And so my dog immediately started digging in that flower bed. And I was thinking about doing it myself because my dog was doing it. And that guy came out of the house and grabbed my dog by the hind legs, hit it in the back of the head with a pipe or a stick, and threw it in the creek. And I was destroyed. And I ran home, and people didn't have cell phones and crap then. And I went and told my mother, we didn't even have a phone. And when we did have one, it had a party line. So she had to walk somewhere to call. And I have no idea how long it took, all that. I had to sort all these things out with my mother about the exact times and everything, because I remembered everything, but it was all over the place, like kids do. And so a little later, seemed pretty quick to me, but it probably wasn't. Here comes my dad driving up in a black car, she called him. This little black car. It's like Mr. Death has arrived. And he got out of the car, he had on his greasy, blue work clothes, and he starts walking up the hill. He said, "You stay here." And I didn't. I followed. And he got up to the the house, and he knocked on the door. The guy opened the door, and he went, pow! Boy, just knocked him flat out. Got him by the ankles, took him out, and threw him to that flower bed till he flattened the flower bed. And then he threw him in that creek. And then he went down and got the dog, which was still alive. And that dog died when I was 17 years old. Yeah, 17. And he was 13.
Oh, God.
So, I mean, and he didn't say nothing to that guy. And that guy, about a month later, that he moved. He decamped like a carnival at Old Bill's in the middle of the night and was gone. But that was then. You know, there wasn't, there's both good and bad to that. But nobody sued. Nobody did that. And he was my hero from that point on because he took care of my dog. He had his faults, like we all do, but he was an amazing father.
There was another story when you were at the garage when you were 15 or so. And he's told this before, but I can't resist.
Well, I think I was 16. My dad, because since he was 42 when I was born, so he was getting up there. And there was a guy who pulled up in a car, and I called him in an article I wrote, Apollo Red, because he was just this big, handsome guy with the big red hair and kind of that gold, looked kind of like Doc Savage or something. And he pulled up, and my dad, by that time's older, kind of heavy, greasy, you know, got a cigar hanging out of his mouth, you know. And the guy comes up and he says, I've come to get my girlfriend's car. And my dad said, which one's that? And he said, what's that right there? He said, oh, no. He said, she owes me for the last car I worked on. And I said, I've got to have at least half on this one before I let it go. He said, no, man, I'm going to take that car with me. My dad said, no, you're not. And the guy said, really? You think I'm not going to take that car? He said, yeah, I don't think you're going to take that car. And so the guy, I pulled his fist back and I thought, boy, I might step in and help my dad. My dad did a little hop and brought up an uppercut that hit that guy so hard it lifted, and I thought this was impossible till I saw it, lifted him off the ground and set him on the fender of that car. And that guy rolled off on the hood and it caught in the hood ornament, which was a swan. And it tore that off and it tore his shirt and he lands on the ground and his feet start kicking and his eyes roll up in his head. And I went, oh my God, Daddy, you killed him. And then sure enough, that guy went still. He wasn't moving at all. And I went over and I said, oh my God, Dad, you've killed him. My dad went over, he had that cigar, had a little box of matches, and you know, he'd fumble around, got those matches out, and pushed it out, takes the match out, and light it. Nah, he'll come around. Flipped that match, and so 15 minutes later, that guy hadn't come around. And my dad's back in there whistling and working, fixing those stuff, and I thought, damn. And so finally, that guy kind of kicks a little, and his eyes open. And he gets up, and it's like a child with an erector set. He's trying to put it together, and he finally got up, and he starts. And he forgot he had a car. He'd been hit so hard that he wandered off like this, and he wandered off past the bit shop, which was the oil bit shop, which was across from us, and just wandered away. And I thought, wow. And so my dad and I were going to go to lunch, you know, but. The cops came up a little, and it was about 2 hours later. I think maybe we did have lunch. I don't remember now. But the cops came up, and they said, Bud, this woman told us you hit her boyfriend over here and had a fight with him and that he left his car. And he said, did you hit him? He said, hard as I could. And I thought, whoa. And they said, Bud, we're going to have to take you with us. And he said, no. I don't think so. Holy cow, Daddy, you know, police. And he was just standing there with that little cigar. And this other guy, the cop, the younger cop on this side, that my dad knew the other one a little. And this guy got out, and when he did, that other cop grabbed him. He said, And I thought, they're going to shoot my dad, but they didn't. And he said, well, Bud, you need to come down later. He said, no, ain't coming. And he didn't come. And they closed the door. And they went away. And we never heard from them again. And that guy did, they ended up paying for that car, but that guy never came back. The lady came back, and all that got worked out. But I do remember that, and I was thinking, oh my God, this guy's going to hit my dad. And you know, and at that time I was a pretty tough kid, to tell you the truth at that time. I thought, I ain't that tough. Man, I ain't never seen nobody get hit that hard.
So you never got up in his face? No.
I was not a fool. And besides, you know, we had a good relationship. I mean, we argued. We didn't get along. I had long hair. He didn't like that, which reminds me of another story. I was there at the garage, and I had hair down to here back there. And a guy came up and was talking. Said, "Yeah," I said, "I think we'll hold that boy down and cut his hair." My dad said, "No." He said, "I hate that hair." But he said, "It's his hair." And he said, if you do that, Undertaker will be wiping your ass. And that guy didn't say any more because he knew him. He just blanched. There's nothing to it. But my dad hated that, and you know, there's stories behind that. There's stories behind that. So it goes on and on.
Well, I guess there's a segue here because there was a really great episode or scene in you know what I'm talking about, I think, where he's driving the car.
Yeah.
And this sort of segues into, I mean, I don't want to get into a real heavy-handed discussion about racism or anything like that, but it permeates the books. It's very important to the books.
It is.
And today happens to be an anniversary, 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King.
Yes. Very valid.
Can you talk about that scene? And
you're talking about the Mucho Mojo truck scene where he stops to help y'all get. Well, that's based on a true story too. What they did is they didn't take it out of the books; they took it out of my life. They borrowed a bunch of things out of my life and have inserted it into the TV series because they read some articles or I told them some things. But first, the true story. Let me just tell the true story. Is that my father, my mother, and I were coming back from Gladewater, and we were through a terrific rainstorm, an incredible rainstorm. It was and I remember it was the very first time that I thought there's something more powerful than my father, because the car was shaking and the rain was slamming. And you know, as a kid, your dad's the man, and he pretty much was, you know. And so we're driving along, and there's a black couple broke down the side of the road, and the man is out, got the hood up, he's got a piece of paper over his head, he's working under the hood trying to get the car to go. And people are driving by and they're going, screw you, nigger, and all just so awful stuff because they were in front of us and we were creeping along. And my dad was like the most verbal racist you ever heard, just awful, you know. And so we got there, my dad turned around, goes back, parks right behind that car. And he gets out, and it's raining, the proverbial cats and dog, and he carries his toolbox with him because he carried it with him everywhere he went. And he went over and talked to that man, and he got under the car because it was underneath. The water's running over him and everything. And he's under there fixing that car, and he gets it going. And there's kids in the car. You see them sitting in the back seat. And he comes back and he gets in the car, and I thought, I hear all this stuff he says, and I just kind of looked at me and went, well, he had them kids in there. Yeah. But it showed me, and when we go hunting, because we would go squirrel hunting because it wasn't a sport. My dad always said, hunting ain't no sport because they ain't shooting back. And I agree with him. But he said, it's meat, we're going to eat it. And so we would go out and kill extra squirrels and take them to the black families that were worse off than we were. We'd go fishing. He would catch extra fish. And what I always noticed is that if he didn't get extra ones, he still gave it to them. And, we'd end up doing that. Or it'd be cornbread night. Cornbread and pinto beans. That was a big standard. So I learned a lot about, it's not, as my friend Andrew Vax says, my brother Andrew says, it's not what you say, it's what you do. And I learned a lot from that. And that was my dad. Well, they borrowed that scene for Mucho Mojo, except in the scene, the father's under the car and a car comes along and hits it and kills it. But it's still, that scene, the basic scene is a true one. And that really I'm running my mouth too long.
Well, tell us a little bit about where the character of Leonard Mine comes from.
Leonard Mine is made up of a lot of different characters, but he was some martial arts friends I had that were gay that we didn't know were gay back then, and they were tough. People. I always thought when I started writing these books, and Leonard turned out to be gay, which I didn't know. It happened in the first novel. I'm like, I didn't know that. But I remembered that some of the friends that I had that were very tough martial artists were like Leonard. And it's always in books and movies, always the goofy neighbor next door, and that's one representation of being gay. In the same way that being heterosexual has its own different representations. We're not all macho tough guys, and we're not. It's a variation. But people are gay. It's always the goofy neighbor next door. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to base it on people I knew. So some of them were black, some of them were white, but I put those things together. And I knew people like that. Hap's based on me. He did the same things I did, worked the same jobs I did, had the same confrontations that didn't go where those go. But I had a lot of, problems being anti-Vietnam War, being for civil rights. It was not popular. And so I took all of that stuff and mixed them into the characters. Also, there are a lot of things I borrowed from my brother in a funny way, because my brother's 17 years older than I am, and he retired from the military. He was in the Marines first and the Army. Very proud of him. He and I didn't disagree on the military. We disagreed on Vietnam, which is a different thing. And I said, when this is over, they will be the same, and they will be our trade partners. And I said that back when I was 18. They thought I was crazy. Look now, I got one right. And but this whole thing, I thought there's 54,000 people died because of that war. So I wanted Hap to be coming from that position, but I wanted Leonard to be coming a little bit more from my brother's position, because my brother was a war hero. So anyway, I thought we get along, we argue, we don't always agree, but we get along, and we have totally different background. He's a Republican, I'm a liberal Democrat. We have those things very much like Leonard. And when I first came up with Leonard, one of the things that struck me is that this is in the 1980s, by the way. I think I wrote it in 89, but before that, I was watching the news, and this was before you had the Fox propaganda channel. It was something else. And I was watching the news, but there was a black man on that was a politician, or he was somebody with an opinion, I don't know, but they had him on, and he was a black Republican. I went, because in the 1980s, you just didn't see that. And so that stuck with me. And I said, that sticks with me. A lot of my best friends are Republicans, And if you live where I am, it's Christians and Republicans, even if you're an atheist and a Democrat, And we get along, but not as well as we did in the past, because now people take complete sides. They say, this is all, nobody wants to believe the truth. They want to believe their truth. And that's on either side, But I do blame the Republicans more, but hey. But anyway, that's what went on, is that I put all of that into it. And I tried to have people that were different, that dealt with each other. And I think it's important. I think it's something to be learned for all of us now. Because instead of talking at each other, we need to talk about it. I notice, I've got some friends that are Republicans, and we get to talking, and we're in more polite talking. We often find things where we agree. It's usually, I don't believe that everything's this way or this way. There's some middle ground here, I had a guy that was going to fix my roof the other day, and he was telling me how he wanted the wall built because of the Mexicans and all of that. And I'm listening to him, and I said, well, how much did that cost to put my roof? He told me how much, and I said, well, you have some other people? He said, yeah, I got those wetbacks. So in other words, you want the wall built to keep the people out you hire, so you can hire them cheaper. Quit hiring them if you think that's what's or accept that somebody can come over here and work. And then, of course, I hired a Mexican to do it. He fixed my roof.
Yeah.
Because and I hired him full price. I did not, he was a green card. It wasn't illegal, but nonetheless, I didn't make him work cheaper. But I didn't hire that guy because I didn't like him, because he was a hypocrite.
Yes.
Because he was a hypocrite. That's the same way I'm about religion. I'm not opposed to you having a religion. I'm opposed to the hypocrisy of, like, what's okay if Donald Trump does all these things, but if Obama had done that, they'd been climbing the wall, And so to me, if you have that opinion, fine, but it's got to have some kind of place where it makes sense, and that it's not my tribe. We've become tribal. We've become tribal. And that used to not be the way it was. Used to people could work together.
Yeah. One of the scariest things out of all the, there's been a host of them recently, I guess, was when he said, I think Trump said, these are words that we will not use now.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember when he said that?
Yeah.
It was like, whoa, now we're getting into Orwell.
And he's always the guy that says, I'm not politically correct, so don't use these words.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, I'm not politically correct in the strictest sense, but there's a difference in righteous political correctness and asshole political correctness. And one you use to say the things that are mean and hateful, and you mean them. You are a racist, and you are a sexist or whatever. And then there are other times when I still say Indian, because people I grew up with that were Native Americans called themselves Indians, a few that I knew, and I don't, and somehow when I say Native American, it's like saying vagina instead of pussy. I don't like it. It seems to be a mistake somehow. One sounds very, very soft and polite, while the other one sounds like some kind of medical thing. So I don't use that. So that's what I mean about political correctness. Right?
It's complicated that way. Well, this is a great time to move on to Bubba Hotep. We're just going all over the place, which is great. Bubba Hotep, how many of you have seen the film?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of fans. I remember you saying that it was you know, the story that you thought least adaptable to
Yeah,
Hollywood.
I told my brother, I said, well, because I've been very fortunate. Everything I wrote has nearly been optioned at one time. I mean, early on anyway. I've written
Yeah.
so many short stories that can no longer be true. But I wrote that one. I said, well, this is one I know nobody will ever option. Not only was it optioned, it was made. And I thought, huh, you know.
And you had Ossie Davis.
Oh
It's
God,
fantastic.
Ossie Davis, my hero from Civil Rights.
Yep.
And one time I was in Italy. Our daughter's a professional singer, and she also writes, does other things. But she had a performance in Italy at a like a festival. I mean, there were other people there, and a guy came up and he said, I had on my Bubba Hotep T-shirt. He said, "Oh, I love my dad in that." And I went, "What?" His name was Guy Davis,
Oh, that's
the blues Mooches. That's his son. And he said, "I want to come up and get a picture with this one and send it to my mom." And I thought, "Oh my God, he's sending this to Ruby D." It was a neat moment. Yeah. And I always think that story is not. It's got goofy aspects, but it's not goofy. It's about facing death. It's about, you know, a lot of different things. Because the guy who thinks he's JFK is black, but he's certain that they dyed him that color.
CIA.
CIA did it, and they took his brain and put it in a jar at the White House, and he's just working off on waves because they have a battery hooked up to it or something. And he has just sand up there, he thinks. And then, of course, Bruce is Elvis, who is there, and is he Elvis or is he this guy thinks he's Elvis? And I kind of came down the side. I'm going to believe he's Elvis.
So he swapped his identity with an Elvis impersonator.
Right. And the Elvis impersonator died, and so that nobody believes him. So he's stuck there. He has an accident. He's in the rest home for years, and when he comes out of it, there's a soul-sucking mummy that's coming in, and I know this doesn't sound like this fits, but it does. And so it's one of those weird films, and I just never thought it would be film. But I'm proud of the story, and I'm proud of the film. And it's very close to the story.
Tell us about Bubba and the Cosmic
Bloodsuckers. I wrote a
Bloodsuckers,
prequel to it that's a little bit more lighthearted in a way, but it's crazy too.
Yeah, it's
and there's a comic book version of it coming out. First issue I think comes out this month, and from IDW Comics. So, but that has to do with what happened with Elvis before, and that the things that he no longer remembered in Bubba Hotep, and there's a reason why, and you get that reason. I don't want to give it away. Sick books sold out anyway, so I guess to hell with it. You
We
know.
still got a couple of them over there.
And there's also the ebooks, and it will be reprinted again, like most everything. But it probably will never be filmed. I said that before. But Bruce is out, you know, because he wanted to do it, and they wrote a script, and he didn't like it. So then he said, if Joe writes a script, I want to do it. I didn't want to write the script. I had other stuff going. And it wasn't enough money at that time to do it, because I had other things I really wanted to do, and I was loving doing. And so it just the time never got right. But I think Don is talking about trying to do a TV series of maybe the younger Elvis. I don't know what he's got in mind altogether, but that's him. He has the film rights. I have the book rights.
Wow. I'm just going to be selfish and ask about some of my favorite Lansdale books, so just indulge me.
Right.
The Magic Wagon. Anything going on?
There's a new version of it out right now.
Yep.
There's a limited edition coming out from Book Voice. It costs $50, but it is beautiful, and it has an article by my son in the back. My dad is Batman, and I love it. And then it has an introduction I wrote. Plus, it has a semi-rare pretty rare short story of mine that's Western that's also included, and artwork and interior artwork. And if you like that sort of thing, and if you're a collector, I advise you to get one now because they only made 500 of them.
Now, some of you were probably here a couple of years ago when you came for the book Dark Paradise. Not
Paradise
Dark,
Sky.
Paradise Sky, excuse me. Sorry.
It's all right. I don't remember them either.
But I think it's one of the best books you've ever
I do
read.
too. I think it is the best book I've read.
Really? Yeah. Can you tell them kind of the premise of that book?
Well, what it is that about 30-something years ago, I wanted to write a book that dealt with the black experience in the West. And I wanted to do it in a way that was humorous and yet was, important, and that it made the points that the research I did that black people in the West didn't just, clean up after people or were cooks and whatever. There were people like Nat Love. Now, Nat Love certainly did a dime novel on himself, which means he made up a lot of stuff. But a whole lot of what he did, other black people did in the West. So I kind of took that character as my character, but I borrow from people like Bass Reeves, who was one of the most famous marshals in the West, and the Indian Nations, as they called it, and was hanging Judge Parker's marshal, along with some other, there was Madden and some other people that were great marshals too, but he was a black marshal, and he wasn't the only one, by the way. And he was known for going alone and getting his man, as they said. And his son even murdered his wife, and he actually went and found him and brought him back and put him in prison. And then when he got out, he got him a job and got him, sort of recycled, so to speak. But he was one of those guys, and he's the source for the Lone Ranger. Because he was the Lone Ranger. He would go by himself, and he used disguises, and he was also a deadly shot. And he was in, they talk about, well, they never really had those guns. Yeah, they did. He was one of them. Wild Bill Hickok was one of them. White Earp was one of them. But this guy, he had 2 or 3. And he fought some of the deadliest criminals of that time. So I incorporated him and actually used him as a character, but borrowed from him as well. I borrowed from Buffalo Soldiers that I had read about. Everybody, you see John Wayne, he's fighting those Indians out in the West. Well, it was mainly the Buffalo Soldiers of the 9th and the 10th. They were the ones that were doing a lot of the Indian fighting. They weren't the only ones, but they were certainly a big part of it. So I wanted to take all of those things, gunfighters, and there were gunfighters too, there were several. But there was, there were Cherokee Bill, who was half Native American, half black. So I took all of these and kind of made them into this one guy, and had his experiences go from being a kid, or well, a young man, not a kid, and why he had to leave East Texas and start traveling across the West. And it is my favorite novel. It's a novel I wanted to write for years, because 30 years ago when I wanted to do it, they said, well, black people don't read. And I said, oh. And then they said, and white people don't want to read about black people. So then later, 90s, I asked again, and it had become a little bit more politically correct. They said, we don't know who our audience is. And then about 10 years later, they went, yeah, we want to do this. And it was the most gleeful moment of my writing career. And I've had many.
Josh at Mulholland?
Yeah, Josh Kendall, my editor. And so I went ahead and wrote that, and I wrote The Edge of Dark Water, which I like, and I wrote The Thicket, which Peter Dinklage is supposed to star in. I hate the script. Can I say that? I hate the script. I hate the script. Yeah, I hope they do another script. But he's the perfect person for it. Oh yeah. And but they decided to not have him talk the way I had him. They wanted him to talk like an old Westerner, which I thought was wrong, because it was the uniqueness of that. It was a guy that wanted to let people think he was educated in a special way. And they got rid of the hog, which is really important, I think. And there are other changes. And they moved it out of East Texas. So other than that, I love it.
Have you read Lauren Estelman's recent book, The Ballad of Black Bart?
No.
Oh, man, it's great.
Is it? Yeah. I've read some of his stuff, but I haven't read that.
Yeah, terrific character.
Black Bart was a real guy.
Fascinating. He walked up to the robberies and just, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It reminded me of something that you would do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I know Lauren.
Yeah, he's a good writer. I should quit plugging other writers.
No, not at all. I plug
yours.
plenty of them. Neil Barrett, all those people. Yeah. You need to find them. The problem with Neil is you have to search. I think I have some of the Hereafter Gang and Interstate Dreams to sell for his
really?
family.
It's all out of print.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's out of print. I want it to go back in print. I can't understand why somebody didn't do it. I mean, they're brilliant. And there's Through Darkest America. You ever read that one?
No.
Oh my God, that's one of his best. Those are my three favorites. Plus, he did a kind of fantasy series with Aldair, who was a pig.
Really?
Yeah. Unfortunately, you don't know that till the end of the first novel, but there's 4 novels, so I've given it away. I've given it away.
He did a lot of science fiction stuff for hire too, and
yeah, he did. He did some work for hire, and it's not all. And he did a lot of what they used to call adult western. I don't know if he did Conan or not. I did Conan. Yeah, I did Conan comics. And in fact, at Robert E. Howard's home, they're having a dig. 2 or 3 weeks. I was supposed to go, but I have to go in for a minor operation, so I may not be able to. But now they said, you can just come catalog stuff, so I'm tempted. But at his house, they discovered that there was an old root cellar out back. And if you don't know who Robert E. Howard is, he invented Conan and many others, and he killed himself in the backyard there. And the house is a museum. And but they discovered there was an old root cellar there, and they had just filled it with stuff from the house and covered it up. And they just recently found out that it exists. So they're going to do an archaeological dig there to see. They're hoping for his typewriter and all that. It'll probably be like Geraldo Rivera and Al Capone's. And open it up. Yeah, rattlesnakes. But they're going to check that out. So I hope I go to that. But I'm sorry, I thought of that because you said Conan.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Well, let's open it up to questions. I'm sure you have some. Or we
I covered everything.
It's covered it all. What else we got to talk about?
How did you come up with the popcorn monster?
Popcorn King?
Yeah, how do you
Wow.
popcorn king?
You know
Like,
what?
How did you come up with that?
When I used to write back in that point in time, my wife would make the devil's popcorn. And what it was is that she would make it in this big pan. You know, we didn't have poppers and stuff. And she would get Krogo from Kroger. And it was just like lard. And you put it in there and let that heat up, and you know, it smelled like a rendering plant kind of. And then you drop that popcorn in there, and it was just greasy as hell. And so we would have that and watch the B movies, low budget movies, like you know, the ones that are mentioned in the drive-in. And so when at night when I would go to bed, it gave me bad dreams because it messes your stomach up. And I would get up and I would write all these stories and all, and then I kept having this dream that I didn't write, which was about the Popcorn King and stuff like that. So I got asked to write an article about drive-ins. Now I didn't mention the Popcorn King, but I wrote a little bit about this fantasy of the drive-in. And an editor, Pat Labruto, read it and said, "Man, why don't you do a novel on that?" And so I said, "Okay." I'd written The Magic Wagon for him. And an aside is I remember when they said, "Joe, this Nook, we don't know. Is this a Western? Is it fantasy? You know, what is it?" And my wife said, "Which one pays first?" And they said, "Western." She said, "It's a Western." So anyway, the drive-in came out of that article. And I wrote it about 2.5 months, and I hated every minute of it. I thought it was the worst thing I'd ever written. And I hadn't written a whole lot comparatively till now. And then later when I read the galleys, is what we used to call them, I said, "This is pretty good. It's different." And I think it's the most original and unique book I've ever written. And it's, you know, I love it. And there's nothing like it, and I can say that with complete assurance. There is nothing like it.
That was my first book.
Wow, thank you. It's one of my favorites. It's also the one that everybody always talks about, but it's gone out of print except ebooks, and I'm hoping to have it back in print.
Lost Echoes. Did something happen to you, or to your family, or to somebody that made you?
Well,
write
if
that?
you
It was such a great
no, not really, but if you, some of the things I talked about tonight in the house that we lived in, that's the house that they live in the book. That father in there is similar to my father. It's not a exact thing, but how that thing came about, it's a weird thing, is I have a friend named Terrell Lee Langford, and he's also a writer, and he's written several good novels. He mainly is a producer on the Bosch episodes, the early seasons, but he was in Houston for a book signing, I think. I cannot remember. I think he and Michael Conley were doing a book signing, and he ended up having a hotel room that he didn't like, and he got another room, but somehow they decided to give him both rooms, and he said, "Do you want to stay?" Because I had to drive back that night. And I said, "You know, I will." Call my wife, said, "I'm going to stick around, hang out." So I was trying to sleep, and outside you could hear the traffic, and you could hear banging and noise, and of course I was too stupid to get up and realize the window was open. And so the next morning I got up, the window was open, and I was exhausted. And but the idea of those sounds kept looping around. I told Lee about the book. I said, "You know what? I got this idea for a book." And he says, "Oh, wow, that's a great idea." And I just went home and wrote it. And well, actually, my agent at that time called Vintage and said he's got this idea for a novel, just a paperback originally he wants to do. They said, "Okay." So I went home and wrote it. It came out very, very quickly. I had known a number of people who had alcohol problems. I was not one of them, but I knew a number who did, and in my family. And I've had a number of people who have had alcohol or drug problems say, "Man, you nailed that." I said, "Did you have problems?" No, but I knew people who did. And I remember them telling me how they'd look at a glass of beer and look at the beads on that glass and that cold beads, and you know. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. So I put that in there. And also, I've been doing martial arts a long time, and one of the characters in there is a martial artist, and he's using martial arts to. He's an alcoholic too. They're both trying to quit being an alcoholic, the older man and the younger man, and he's trying to help this kid through martial arts. So all of it just kind of came together. And but it's probably one of those that I know less where it came from than others, because it's not as directly out of my life as some of the others.
I just thought the concept of
sounds.
Something really bad happens somewhere that.
Yeah, well, the idea
there.
is that when something bad happens through, like if this gentleman here was to grab me and sling me up against that thing and I bang my head on that forever that sound is caught in that wood. And so if somebody hit that board, and this guy was around because of an ear infection he had that caused him to change internally, he could visualize what had happened there if it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or whatever. So he, in a sense, could time travel and see the crime. And so that was the basis for all that was going on in Lost Echoes, and them trying to, and sometimes he couldn't figure it all out, and so he would investigate because his girlfriend was a police officer, and he had this, he had a drinking problem, and he had a friend that was a scumbag, and all this sort of stuff was in there too. But the primary thing is the fact that action and violence are caught in sound. And it came from an old idea they used to have that also came to me that nobody believes now. But there were a lot of people who believed that when they made pottery, and whatever they were talking about at the time when they were swirling that pottery would, like a record, go into the pottery. And they thought if you could play the pottery like a record, those sounds would come back. Well, but nonetheless, I thought, oh, I love that. And so, yeah, and so it all started kind of coming together. It's like all of my stuff. There's a piece here, a piece there. I never plot. I never sit down and plot things. They just kind of explode. And I know when I have it, even if I can't tell you what it is. But I'll know every morning when I get up that that's what happens next. That's how I know. People say, well, I said it's like humming a melody for me. When it starts to sound right, I know it's there even if I couldn't tell you what it is yet. Because I don't sit down and plot them. Once in a while, an entire story will jump into my head, like a short story. And I had one novel do that in a night, which was cold in July. I would dream it, and I'd get up and wash my face, go back to bed, and I got up the next day. I realized I had an entire novel that I had dreamed. And I wrote it pretty much like I dreamed it. I mean, a few descriptions come in, and there were some characters that I didn't dream, but that novel was there in my head.
It's funny, I was going to ask you about that. It seemed like, was it sort of an homage to the gold medal stuff?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
When I loved like all the old John D. McDonald's and stuff like that. In fact, the first to Happen Leonard, all the Happen Leonard have elements of that, but the first one, Savage Season particularly, because I had a 2-book contract with Bantam, and I wanted to write crime novels. I had a 2-book contract to do that, so I wrote Cold in July first, and then I wrote Savage Season, and I thought I was done, and then 3 years later I ended up writing the second one, because I didn't know it was a series.
Right.
I just thought it was a standalone book.
Wow. How did you like the movie version of Cold?
I like it. There's things that I don't like, but I'm always going to be that way.
Yeah.
Because I invented it. And but do I like it? I think I have been treated about as good as anybody in film so far. That means the next one maybe not. But Cold in July I really liked. I thought the female character was pushed aside and made the little woman that stands in the background, which you didn't like that in the book. But I like it, and I love the Happen Leonard series. I think Bubba Hotep's the closest. I love the incident on and off of Mountain Road that they did for Masters of Showtime. You had a question.
Yeah, when you were a kid in Nacogdoches, was there Klan presence?
I wasn't a kid in Nacogdoches. I was a kid in Gladewater. But there was Klan presence in East Texas. Vidor, places like that.
Yeah.
Yep, it was there. It was not as open, but it was there. And there was, there's also the people that share those beliefs without wearing the hood.
But were you aware of it as a
Yes,
kid? You were.
yes. Because my dad hated them, and he was a racist, but he hated them because he thought they were cowards, and he couldn't stand a coward. He couldn't stand a bully, and that's why he punched that guy for doing my dog. Do it with a grown man, not some puppy and my child. But. Yeah, I do remember Klan presence. I certainly do. I don't remember people wearing hoods and walking around, but I knew they existed. There was a hill, not real well. It wasn't in Gladewater, but it was farther down the road, and the Klan would burn crosses there. And I never saw that happen, but I've gone up there and seen where it had been. And people go, "Yeah, my Uncle Billy's in there, and they burned it up there."
Do you think that? Go ahead.
Were you born in Gladewater?
I was.
Okay.
Gladewater, Texas, and then I lived in Mount Enterprise briefly. Then I moved back to Gladewater, graduated high school there, and then I moved around some. But I've lived in East Texas most of my life. I lived in Berkeley and San Francisco area a little while. I lived in Austin a little while, and I've traveled all over the world. But I live in East Texas. I live in Nacogdoches, which is not very far from Gladewater.
I know where you live.
Do you? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You from that area?
No, my brother had a home there just north of the Nacogdoches.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we fished in that paper mill.
I know
with
that.
the alligators.
Yeah, I know. Man, that is that. I don't know if that's the one I was thinking of, but you go out there to fish and it wasn't nothing but alligators.
That's exactly it.
I think you know what? There can't be many fish here.
Those alligators good eating?
Yeah. What's that?
Are they good eating?
Yeah, they are. I mean, I'm not like a guy that lives and dies by an alligator sandwich or something, but I've had them. They fix them up, and it's sort of. They fix them the same way you would fix chicken, but people say, does it taste like chicken? No, it tastes like alligator.
Yeah.
It's somewhere between fish and chicken, but not really. It's like people say, well, squirrel tastes like chicken. No, it don't. It tastes like squirrel. Yeah. It's really different.
Like frog legs, alligator?
I've eaten frog. I think you're right. I think alligator's a little tastier to me than frog legs. But there's some similarity. They're not fish, but they're not exactly meat either as you think of it. And usually the tail is what they fix. But and when they did Savage Season, they had alligators in it, and they had one named Jack. And to go out and we'd see Jack, and Jack had a head that big. But Nick D'Amici, who wrote a lot of the scripts, one night went out with the guy that was the alligator master. And so what he did, they'd go out and feed the alligators. They give them chickens and stuff because it was like an alligator preserve. I thought they just hunted their own stuff, but they would go out and Nick said they were walking out and going in the water, and that guy said, now if an alligator comes up behind him, just hit him with his stick.
Right.
And Nick said he looked back and their lights were way in the distance, and he thought, damn. But he went all the way out there with the alligators and feeding alligators.
Jesus.
Yeah. They asked me, you want to go? I said, you think I'm an idiot? I grew up in East Texas and Louisiana. I know. No.
Who was that guy that was the Australian?
Crocodile Dundee.
Not him.
Steve.
The guy that was
Steve Earle.
met a very poetic ending. Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't an alligator.
He was pressing his own luck for a long time.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Crocodile.
Yeah. Well, I think this has devolved into frog legs.
Yeah, frog legs. Anybody have another question?
Yeah.
We've got time for one more if you want to do it. All right, I've answered everything. So.
Well, hey, thanks so much, Joe. As
Thank you.
always. Thank you.